Okay, so I think we can start. Sorry for small delay. Some technical issue with recording. At the beginning, I would like to say that this topic, this session, is not directly connected to Drupal itself, the Drupal development, but it's connected to some developer technique you can apply with Drupal and not Drupal project. My name is Mariusz Gil, and today I would like to talk a little bit and maybe inspire you with a technique called Event Storming. Have you ever heard about the Event Storming? No? Okay, perfect. Event Storming? Event Sourcing. So Event Storming is a step before the event sourcing. And I need to say that this technique changed completely the way I am thinking as a developer. It's changed, it's affected my development processes. And today I would like to talk a little bit about it. On a daily basis, I'm working with Ortega IT Minds team. This is a consultancy company. I'm working as a trainer, as a consultant, as an architect with different teams, usually trying to adopt maybe a better software architecture, maybe a better software design. I'm also run my own consultancy company, which is a source ministry, and that's it, almost that's it about me. I'm a professional PHP developer since 2000. I had the occasion to work with Nasza Klasa and Gadu Gadu, so this is my favorite project I was involved in. Okay, I believe that events like this one, like DrupalCamp, like local meetups, like conferences, should be all about inspiration. To inspire you to your own research. And there will be not so much code on this presentation, but I hope it will give you some advices and hints how to convert this idea into the code for you. As I mentioned, as a developer since 2000, so I need to say that for very, very many years, I was obsessed with frameworks, with databases, with technical solutions, and it affected my way of thinking as a developer. Let me show an example how the technical issue, how the technical choices may affect your business. I don't know, I'm not connected directly to the Drupal community, so forgive me if I made a mistake, but in many, many complex projects, at the beginning there is a very important question. What kind of framework we should choose, what kind of database we should choose, and if you allow some technical choices to affect your architectural decisions, you will probably have some trouble in the future when this project will be older and older and older, and your business logic will be directly connected and mixed with some particular technology decisions like libraries or frameworks. And it means that in many, many projects I'm involved today, this doesn't matter. This is my first approach. I would like to not think about the technical stuff at the beginning of the project. I would like to not think about the framework, databases. So what's left? The most important part of the project for me at the beginning of the project is to gather a knowledge about it. And you know, sometimes we are working on very, very similar or very, very simple software like Root, Create, Retrieve, Update, Delete software, and I believe that this software should be generated eventually with some modifications, with some extensions from our side to give us the time to develop some more complicated software. And if you would like to work, or if you work on complicated software, there is a few steps to achieve a really, really good situation. The first step, which is probably the most important, at least from my side, is about capturing the problem, capturing the knowledge about what should be done in this particular project. And I don't know what kind of technique you are using in your project. Maybe some of you are using a specification, maybe some BPMN notation, maybe some user stories, storytelling, or whatever. What I found was, for me, is telling stories using the events. And this talk will be also about the events. So capturing the knowledge is the first step, is probably the most important step in project, because if we made a mistake on this phase of the project, final result will be not exactly what our customer wants. If we've got a knowledge capture, different ways of course, we can embed it, this knowledge into the code. I'm working usually with some complex software, using a domain-driven design technique, event sourcing, TQRS, or some other stuff. And this is just a tool, not goals, just the tools to embed the captured knowledge to the code base. And when we've got the knowledge embedded into the code and deployed to production, I would like to do anything to protect my deployed and embedded software from outside of the world. And I will point it a little bit later at this point. And I mentioned a domain-driven design. The domain-driven design is a maybe not a pattern. The idea of thinking about the software introduced by Eric Evans in 2003 in his book called Tackling Complexity in the Heart of Software. And the main motto for this one is that critical complexity of most software projects is understanding of the domain itself, not the implementation. So, as a developer, I was looking away how I can understand the problem. And a couple of years ago, I realized that probably the simplest one and the most efficient is just meet and talk with people. And this is a moment when I found an event storming. The event storming is a technique introduced in 2015 by Alberto Brandolini, which is an Italian programmer and agile coach. He proposed a set of steps to gather the knowledge and embed this knowledge into the code. And after 3 years, or maybe 4 years, of using it in a real project, I need to say that almost every single project I'm involved in, we start from event storming. Even if the software is 10 or 12 years old and there is a mature business behind the software, when I start to work with this company, we are starting from the event storming because there are many benefits from the session. And some of the sessions are connected with business, just to gather the knowledge, and some of the sessions are connected to the development processes, just to implement the knowledge gathered on previous sessions. Okay, so what do you need to perform this in your project? The first one, probably the most important, is you need the people with questions. In this conference, it's probably about the people who need a knowledge to implement the project. If you got the questions, you probably got the people with some answers. Maybe the business guys, maybe our customers. Who's ready to answer our questions. And the last thing is just environment. An empty space, empty room with walls. Wall is working the best. And some magic weapon. And this magic weapon looks like that. Just sticky notes and markers. And every single guy in the room, every single person has a dedicated set of sticky notes and markers. And using this stuff, you can start to tell your story. And what is a story? Story is a set of events, set of particular moment in time. So if you know something about your domain, about your process, about your business process, name it and put it on the model. So at the beginning, the model on our system will be built just from the event. This is, of course, a very, very artificial example. Part of the travel agency application, where we've got a particular moment of the time which is a reservation requested. One of our customers requests a reservation. If you've got a lot of people in the room and every single person has some knowledge about the domain and can express it and extend your model with this information, after a few minutes you've got a lot of different events. Maybe some of them are very, very perfect design. Maybe some of them is just an entry point to discussion about the requirements. And if you perform one step more, which is ordering this event in the context of the time, you've got the processes in your system. Because for this part of the event, there is only one single combination which makes this process valid. The first is reservation must be requested, then our application needs to check availability and some limits for this customer, and if everything is okay, it's fine, reservation, we can accept the reservation. And of course, as you see, this is a flow, set of the events. From the developer's perspective, because at the beginning the session is all about the business, all about the gathering knowledge. From the developer's perspective, every single event is just a class with a set of properties. For example, what kind of properties we can have here. So when this reservation was created, for whom, for what, and it's very, very easy to identify all the properties. Which reservation was accepted and when. And you've got a DTO class with some getters. No logic should be contained in this class. Okay, so if you've got a process modeled with events, which is, I think you shouldn't see any particular technical choices like databases, like frameworks or whatever at this step. So this is a perfect moment to have a great conversation with clients, which is a business oriented, right? So if you've got a flow, you can start to extend your model with some other elements. For example, with actors. What actor and which actors are connected to the flow? And of course, this is a happy path, right? This is a happy path of the process. And if you would like to model some alternatives, just extend the model. So for example, in a situation where our reservation cannot be processed in our system, there will be probably event called reservation rejected. Our system rejected a confirmation or request. And this is a perfect moment to ask the question, how to handle this rejection? Because if we reject this reservation, we lose money. And maybe if you've got a business guys in the room, maybe there is a separated flow in our application, for example, for proposing a similar offers. And this similar offer will be proposed, for example, by an agent, another actor in the process. And of course, from the technical point of view, there are some external systems connected with this example. So if we are working on software for the travel agency and we would like to check availability and some limits for some flights or maybe hotels, we need to communicate with external services, for example with HTTP. Or we would like to notify some customers that reservation was processed, right? And in our system we can have the information that this confirmation for the reservation was delivered and opened, if we can go further with our process. And from the business perspective of the flow, this model may be extended with some other elements. For example, if we need to communicate with some external services, maybe probably this is a price for this connection. And for every single API usage, for example, we need to pay. So we lose money, right, in this place. But when the reservation will be accepted, we earn some money. So we need to track these values, we need to visualize these values and provide some information. And this model may be extended with some other element. And after a few minutes, you've got your model of your system presented on the wall, and you probably had a great discussion about it. So, okay, it was very, very artificial example, so let me show you a real session from a real project from one team I'm working with. This is a recording from 2 sessions, 2 sessions, 3 hour long session each. in the upper corner, there will be a view for the whole team. The main view is just a model taken, I don't know, maybe every 10 minutes or something like that. And take a look at the team, how many discussions between people were performed. The first step at the session, it's called a wide exploration. We generate ideas, we generate events, we are trying to identify every single point in the business process, which is important from my perspective, maybe from the business perspective. And during this idea generation, there was a lot of questions already asked. So each purple sticky note represents unanswered question. After a few minutes, when this model was fulfilled with some greater number of sticky notes, we started to organize this random ordered events into the processes. And even more events were found, more questions were asked. And sometimes there wasn't a person who was able to answer this question. So we started to write a notes. We started to calling people into the room. And more info about this process. This process was related, and this model was related to the software for a company which is 10 years old. And even 10 years old company, with some processes, there are some unanswered questions. We started to write a notes how we can solve some process into the code. We added some external systems to get information how hard implementation for particular model will be. We started to identify the actors, because the actor means that sometimes you need to prepare a separated front-end for this. We started to track values, which is not maybe very interesting for developers, but from business perspective, yeah, it's very, very interesting. We perform also some voting to identify a very, very hard to implement elements in the software. So, for example, each very, very thin sticky note represents a vote from the developers team. It was an answer for question from this event, what you see at this moment on the board, which is very, very problematic in the context of implementation for you. And after 1 minute, we identify 3 elements in the software which are really, really painful. And they need to be solved by senior developers, not the juniors. And after 6 hours of modeling, we had all the requirements presented, discussed, organized, and the next step was just implement these requirements. If you've got a business flow, and there is a bunch of different business flow, it's just take a picture and take a keyboard and implement it. And so this is a visualization of process, which is, as I said, 10 years old, but you can apply this technique as well to something which is really, really new. Because there is something under the hood. You can change your decision before implementation. What I found after a few years of running the Event Storming workshops with teams is that sometimes, from my best project, I realized that we failed too many times because we hadn't knowledge, the right knowledge about what should be implemented in this project. So, okay, visualization of this process, okay, maybe a bit different because it depends from the people from the team. This is an example from Robert Laszczak, which is a developer from Krakow, from his project, from his team. And notation is a little bit different because, as you see, there is an orange sticky note which represents an event, a business event, something from the process, and some markers, sticky notes from question. But this notation is a little bit extended with some blue sticky notes, because blue sticky notes represent something which is very, very connected to the software, not business, but the software. We will talk about it in a few minutes. The question is, why this technique is so powerful that even ThoughtWorks, the company by Martin Fowler, is added to the technology radar. Because it's all about the bad decision. During the modeling, you made a mistake. During implementation, you make a mistake. And what is the cost of fix or change a bad decision during modeling and implementation? If you are modeling and you would like to change your decision, it's all about writing a sticky note, a new sticky note, and put it in the model. If you made a mistake and your mistake was already implemented and deployed to production, the cost of this change is obviously very, very high. So, and this is our tradition during every single event storming workshop, no matter if it's training or production. We started to gather all the change decision, and each sticky note taken from the model represents a change decision. This photo was taken at the training, so maybe this is not very, very accurate to the production, but this photo was taken by my team in Krakow. Unfortunately, I can't say that what is the core of the process, because it's very, very project specific, but the number of change decision during modeling is huge. And imagine that if there will be no opportunity, no occasion to change this mindset before the implementation, every single sticky note will have some commits behind. So Alberto Bandolini years ago said that it's developer misunderstanding or understanding, not the expert knowledge, that gets released in production. And I can only agree with this sentence, that because if you don't really understand what is your domain, what is your expectation from your client or expert, you will make a mistake and no one will be satisfied at the end of the project. So the photos you saw, the sessions you saw, was something called Event Storming Big Picture. It's all about trying to capture a big picture of your system, big picture of your requirement. And sometimes it's completely enough to stop the project. Last year I was in Warsaw working with my customer, where we started the second version of the project. There was a particular team which was authors of the first version 1 of this project, and a couple of years later this customer decided to rewrite the project from scratch because they had some feedback from the market, they had extra knowledge and extra new requirements, and they ordered version 2 of the project. And there was a written specification. The specification was delivered to the team, and guess what? How many questions were asked by developers in the specification? 0. Because every single guy in the room was an author of version 1 of the software. Fortunately, the client decided to organize an event storming before the implementation. And during the session, there was a single guy in the room, not developer, it was a business guy, who asked about a single event, a good question about a single event. And new discussion was started, and after 15 minutes of the discussion, the project was shut down for 3 months, because the business realized that there is a very, very piece of the business and the software which is completely not included into the specification. And after 3 months, they need 3 months to have an idea how to solve this business issue in business layer. The project was started again with, of course, at the continuation of this session. And from the developer's perspective, there is a second level of this technique, which is called a design level. A design level event storming is mostly about transforming the knowledge from the big picture into the code using a domain-driven design, event sourcing, CQRS stuff. So, for example, imagine that our process with our travel agency had some loyalty program under the hood. And we've got a paying customer. When someone paid the price for the travel, we've got a payment registered in our system. And we've got the information how much was paid, when, by who, and etc. etc. And we can start some process. We can get the payment value. We can convert a payment value to the loyalty points. We can register the points. And if user has enough loyalty points, we can adjust his level in our loyalty points. And of course, the events in this example represent something from the past. This is a reaction of our system, which is expressed in the code with class. But there's a bunch of reasons about. There's a bunch of possibility reasons like that this event may be introduced in our system. So, for example, event may be reaction for user action. Event may be reaction for some other event. Maybe event is reaction for some process, or maybe just a time. So as you see, there is a bunch of possible reasons. So in this example, a blue sticky notes represent a user action with developer pattern called command. When user or system wants to execute action in our system, we can embed this request into the class as well. And we can model this class with some properties. For example, how many points should be registered for whom and when. Converting the system to events and commands have a very, very pretty benefit. You've got very, very small classes, and you've got they are like building blocks, and you can combine them into the bigger picture using some other classes. So, for example, when you've got information that some points were registered into the account, and maybe the upgrade limit was reached, so you need to have information what are the limits for particular level in your loyalty program, and if the limit was reached or higher, you need to, for example, upgrade your account. So for example, as you see that we've got a new element in our system. This is a read-modele, and this is a reactive policy. And read-modele is probably just from the developer's perspective, it may be just a table in our database, maybe an entry in cache, whatever. This is information just for reading. This element is all about connecting actions with other actions. So when our system receives the information or see the event called upgrade limits reached, this policy, which is also the class, will trigger an action called upgrade account status. Or maybe this action may be triggered manually by, let's say, a customer service. And of course, the core of the design using this stuff is all about the looking for the objects which should be written into the database. In the terminology of domain-driven design and the stuff, it's called the aggregate. So in this context, we will have a loyalty account, which accept the commands and produce the events. And if we take a look on this picture, we should realize that we've got a separated contexts. We've got a payment registered context, and we've got a loyalty context. And this is a great benefit for us as the developers, that our system almost always has some contexts. So, for example, imagine that you're working on e-commerce application. And e-commerce application, you probably know that there is a class called product, right? And product has a set of attributes: names, comments, ratings, dimensions, availability, whatever. Many, many comments. And probably class will be very, very huge. But if someone ordered this product and paid for this product, and our warehouse will receive information about the delivery, dimension of this product will be probably completely different. For example, if you would like to order a wardrobe from IKEA, which is very, very huge, from the context of delivery of this product, dimensions, instead of having single dimension, you will have a set of dimensions, because the wardrobe will be delivered as a set of packages, and every single package have a separated dimension. And very, very important, instead of having a single product class, we will have a set of product classes in different namespaces. So, using all this technique, I would like to show you a picture that changed my way of thinking about the development completely. This picture was proposed by, one more time, Alberto Bandolini, and this is it. We've got the actor in our system, and our actor usually would like to perform an action. It's not about the reading from the system, but sending an action, like registering payments or something like that. When our system receives this action, this command, and using a command handler pattern, this command will be executed, and probably some business object from our system will be involved into the transaction. And if you've got an object and you change this object, like you change the payment status in payments, you've got an event that something was changed in your system. And this event is very, very important, because you may store this event into the database, and you may use them in future. For example, there was a project in Wrocław related to the e-commerce, where there was a very, very obvious object called basket or cart, and what kind of actions you can perform as a user on this basket or cart. You can add the product, you can remove the product, you can clear the basket, and this basket was saved in session. Just save and store this object in the session, but for every single operation executed by user, this basket generated an event. Product removed from basket, product added to the basket, cart cleared, and every single event was stored into the database. And after 1 year of running the software into the production, the customer said something like that one of our analytics noticed that there is a set of users, and they behave very, very weird, because they are adding a lot of elements to the basket, remove something, and then there is a checkout. And we would like to know what kind of products they are removing from the basket, because if basket is, let's say, very, the cost, let's say 2,000 euro, and someone remove a product for 20 euro, from the business perspective, it is obvious that we can offer this removed element as a gift if and only if you will buy the basket. So it took only 3 hours to implement this feature, because every single information about the removed product was already in the system, because all the events generated by the application from last year was in the database. It was just take a look on your events and prepare a dashboard, what kind of products were removed, and so on and so on. So this dashboard was just a read-modele, which is offered to the user. And of course we can export events from our application to some external systems. And some external systems may send a command to our system. Imagine that you are working on Drupal application and it should be connected to some other systems, and you can implement this integration on many different ways. One of the best possible way of implementing where some asynchronous method will be involved is just use the events and put this event into some systems like, I don't know, maybe Kafka, maybe RabbitMQ. It's just serialize an event to the JSON and send to the other system. And of course, this is a very easy to find all this stuff in the project. During the session, if you've got a facilitator, the guy which is hosting the session, and sometimes the responsibility for this guy is just ask the right question. When this event will be triggered, by who, why, maybe how much we've got the event. It's just a flow to identify. And from the developer's perspective, one more time, there is a bunch of projects on the GitHub where you can see this implementation. You can see the effect of event storming into the code. So, for example, this is a repository by my friends, by example factory, with some complex stuff where you can see the application which has some CRUDs, which has some processes using a domain-driven design, using a CRUD-generated software. And the beginning of this project was exactly an event storming. The outcome of this session from the developer's perspective, you will have, of course, a knowledge about your system. You will have a knowledge about requirements and client's perspective. And forgive that examples are in Java, but the topic is not directly connected to the a particular technology. You may have objects, events, commands. You can have an object which is ready to send an event when some commands will be processed by this object. You can have a very complex flow in your system, just connecting commands and events. So we are the PHP developers, right? There is a perfect example of this concept called Saga for our ecosystem, called Broadway Saga, which offers you to flow how your system may react for some long-running business processes where your process involves some external services, and you've got possibility to roll back this process. And if you've got some external services like REST APIs or something like that, you have no possibility to perform a rollback like a database. Moreover, if you've got events, commands, and your objects, you can identify your acceptance criteria for your system. So I hope you write a test, at least for some part of your projects, like unit tests, maybe some BHAT tests. So BHAT is using Gherkin, and Gherkin is all about given when then scenarios. So given is a set of the events, nothing more. When is just command, and then it's another set of events, and you can model your acceptance criteria directly from your event storming session. Connecting all this, maybe some of these concepts are very advanced. Using a single point of view for this is an architecture of many complex projects right now. When you've got a separated part from processing some complicated process in your system, and you've got some presentation layer, and you've got some processing layer, and so on and so on and so on. And no matter what kind of technology you are using, Java, PHP, PHP, Ruby or .NET, whatever. For PHP, there is a perfect set of the tools, perfect set of components, completely independent from any framework, which is, for example, a proof. And you can implement some complex project, some complex part of your system outside your standard solution, and just integrate your solution using the events. So you're working as a Drupal developers, right? So many Magento developers and Magento projects are using exactly this idea to protect some very complicated part of the processes, and they would like to not merge new code related to this complex software into the Magento core. It's very easy to do with events. So, as takeaways from this session, I would like to point this few things. On the big picture, event storming, you can identify some business events, some business flow, maybe some problems, and have a great, believe me, a great conversation with your client about these problems. You can identify some boundaries in your software. One of the first sessions with my actual team, from the first session of event storming, was we've got the software which is 12 years old, and inside this software there is a 16 different elements unfortunately connected in the monolithic application. And right now what we are doing is trying to extract every single element we found at event storming session to separated application and integrate the software using events. If you would like to go further, you can perform some process modeling using event storming with some command, policies, read models, personas. If you would like to extend your model with some business guides, for example, with some metrics, because you can, if you've got an event, you can start to measure the event. So, for example, how often this event is introduced in our system, etc., etc. And finally, you can perform some software design, like aggregates, read models, reactive policies, using CQRS, event sourcing, and whatever. And the main point and the main reason why the event storming is working so well is all about the communication. During the modeling, you've got a lot of communication. And during every single session I saw in the last years, there is a many moments that people are talking directly on requirements, having a great conversation. Here. This is not stock photo. This is the production photos from different sessions. It's all about a common understanding on the problem. And one more time, as Alberto Bandolini said, the software development is a learning process, and the working code is just a side effect. So, believe me, you can use this technique for many different years, many different ways. So, for example, for onboarding people, knowledge gathering, software design, and so on. And as the next steps, what I would like to recommend to you, the first is, of course, to read this book. This book was recently updated 2 days ago, finally. This book contains all the knowledge you should have to perform an event storming session. I started a few days ago a new repository with some extra links, with some articles, with some presentation. It's called Awesome Event Storming on GitHub. Maybe this is a good point to start. And finally, if you know the knowledge, just perform a session. And these are the sessions from different people from Twitter, from different projects, from CMS systems, from e-commerce applications, from meetups, because no matter what is your project, what is your domain about, believe me, it will work. Thank you. Have you got a time for questions? So? Is there okay, there is a question.
I have one question. How much do you need, or how much the client should know about the project before we begin an event storming session? What I am aiming at, you mentioned this client from Warsaw who delivered some specification to his team and later organized an event storming session, and based on that he actually stopped the project. Now somehow this doesn't seem to me like an ideal workflow. So, you know, what is prior to the event storming? What should be the ideal base from which to start?
You know, I was at the sessions where there was a very, very old project behind, and I was at the session where there was completely no software behind. It was just an idea. The client has an idea, and the session was about how we can design it. And of course, if you've got some knowledge at the beginning and you can share this knowledge to the team, you've got this is a perfect situation, probably much better than no one is know anything about the project. But usually, and this is the case from the Warsaw, the client is thinking about the happy paths and yeah, the reality. And we as the developers, we are really, really good in looking at some alternatives and some issues with flows. If we combine these things together, this is a perfect combination. But answering your questions, I think the best results you will have if you know something about your domain, especially if there is a person or persons which are domain experts in the room. Because if there is no persons who have a domain knowledge, we can only model our expectations or maybe imaginations. So yeah, if there is no people like that, yeah, the session probably have no sense.
Okay, thank you.
I will be here for a while, so thank you very much.
Maybe one more?
Ah, yes, sorry.
Yes, sorry, one more.
No,
So I can imagine this working really well when you do it in-house with a big team developing software. But in my experience, like 80% of the software projects, when you work with a client, they first start with a big set of papers, and they say, build this for me, and it will be perfect because it will be everything I need. And then you need to explain, like, oh, well, this probably will not work if we build this letter by letter for you, and then this process starts. So how do you sell this process to customers? How do you convince them that they first need the event storming and all of these sessions and all of these people and invest?
You know, it sometimes, of course, depends, because if client is very, very open, it's a perfect situation. But sometimes, especially in situation you mentioned, we are performing event storming in our team. Especially we are looking for hotspots, I mean the questions. And when we've got a lot of questions, because we have no knowledge, usually we are starting sending photos of our sessions to the customers. And there is explanation, okay, we performed a workshop in our group of people, and we've got questions and we would like to meet and just a talk. And then we can start to show our model, and usually clients are very, very interesting. Okay, so what is this? Tell me about it. And then usually, almost always, they want to participate in the next session, and it's done.
Okay, that's very smart. And do you charge them for extra for this?
This is part of the project, so just for the time of developers, usually.
So yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for your questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.